The way buyers interact with companies has changed. Buyers have more options and they have more knowledge available at their fingertips than ever before because there's so many companies out there and there are so many options. And this thing called the internet makes it really easy for any buyer to find what they're looking for. Hence, the introduction of inbound sales and marketing. In this episode of Solving Inbound, we're going to answer the question, I've only been doing outbound marketing. How is inbound different and what does it mean I need to do for my business? Let's do it. All right, John. So we're answering the question, I've only been doing outbound in the past. How is inbound different and what do I need to do inbound now? So I've got a couple of key areas that I really want to focus on today. I think the obvious one is what is inbound versus what is outbound. I want to make sure that we define them and maybe give a really easy example that we can work through with this. And then secondly, I want to dive into what does it require to potentially make the switch from outbound to inbound? And if we have to actually use the phrase switching, or can they actually work together? Does that sound about right for you?
Sounds great.
Awesome. All right. So why don't we get started with what is inbound versus what is outbound? John, let's lay the groundwork. What is inbound marketing?
Well, you're exactly right that inbound marketing can't exist without, as you said, this thing called the internet. And if you go back 50 years before the internet was a thing, 20 years even before it reached the level of pervasiveness in our lives that it has now, the way we bought has changed. It was different. And there's so many statistics that tell that story. I remember reading something about the number of times a person would visit a car dealership before they bought a car. And it used to be something like it's like 4.7 times before they made a purchase. They would go in, wild. They would look at a lot of models, they would get a lot of glossy brochures, maybe take some test drives, because that's the only way they could learn about the product, was to go to the source and talk to a salesperson. Nowadays, as you know, and that number is like 1.2 times, and I'm guessing at these statistics, but they're pretty close to accurate.
If you go to think the last time I went more than once either.
Right. You go to a car dealership, I feel like I show up and know what I want. Already looked on their website, you know the financing, you know the models, you know the color, you know everything, you know that it's on the lot and you're ready to buy, because all of those steps of education that you used to have to do at the dealership, you can now do on demand at home. And that's emblematic of what inbound marketing is in general. It is the ability to self-educate before you make a purchase.
And you know, what's really, I think the other difference there is the readiness of the buyer. Like when they actually come to you. So I've done all my research on I bought a car, or I leased a car a couple of years ago, and I showed up on the lot and said, is this one available? Like I wasn't, show me a car that does these things. I was like, I knew all of this. And I think it really has to do with how active a buyer is in their buyer decision now. Is with outbound marketing, it's really about you're pushing your message out. You're trying to get people to get eyes on your product and say, this is the fancy new thing. With inbound, they're going about, and you said it right, they're educating themselves, they're self-educating, and then they're showing up and just saying, I want that one. And, you know, there's a really great example. Obviously, we work a lot with They Ask You Answer, but there's a great example in the book. Again, They Ask You Answer by Marcus Sheridan, that talks about the purchasing decision of a pool. And a pool is obviously a really complicated buy. It's not like you're going and buying, you know, even new sneakers. New sneakers can be a complicated. I'm a runner. I buy a lot of sneakers, but like a pool is a significant investment. But the way that They Ask You Answer works, and again, They Ask You Answer is a framework for doing inbound marketing correctly, is this person rather researched a ton about pools, figured out which one they wanted, the size, they did all their homework. And when Marcus showed up at their house and said, all right, let's talk about pools, they said, here's exactly what I want. I know how much I have to pay for it. I've done all my work already. I just need you to say that this sounds right for me. And that's the difference between outbound and inbound, is they were so ready to buy that they already knew what they wanted.
But they could only get to that place if they are able to access a whole library of educational material that allows them to know exactly what they want, to be really familiar with the process, and to become educated buyers. And really, that's at the root of inbound marketing is a desire to educate your buyers, to put out the educational, instructional, trust building material that is going to allow someone to come to your website and figure out how they can solve their problem with your product and service. So that's inbound, like they are inbound to your website. They're coming to you, as opposed to outbound, as you said, where you are blasting out a message, putting it on a billboard, putting it in a commercial break, and showing it to everyone who is watching that show or driving on that highway or anything else. It's blasting a message to a vast array of people, maybe 10%, 5%, 1% are actually interested in what you're selling, versus having people come to your website, learn about the pools that you sell, learn about the cars that you sell, learn about the service you provide, who are much closer and much more likely to make a purchase.
I'll give you another example, and this one is one I experience probably like once or twice a month, which I always find it fascinating because it's such a clear example of what you're saying. Of outbound is you, the company, reaching out to your buyers and saying buy from me, versus inbound is they're walking in your doors and saying I'm going to buy it. There's these. I live in Massachusetts. I drive to Connecticut where my family lives to go visit home, doing the family stuff. And there's these billboard ads for this like weight loss supplement. And there's like a number of them, and they show the transformation of this person. And every time I drive home, they always stand out. And I always see them and I'm like, man, I support that. Like, hey, somebody's doing this. They're going and they're achieving the goal that they want to achieve. But I never remember what the company is. I could draw the billboard. I have no idea what the company is because one, I'm not their target market. And two, I resonate with the story that's being told, not the company that's telling it, especially because I'm driving, 70, maybe 75 miles an hour down the highway, not really paying attention to it. But then I thought about it today as we were preparing for this episode. And I was like, I'm going to go search weight loss, how to lose weight fast, which is basically their slogan on this billboard. And when I search it, it's a completely different experience. I find things like how to lose weight in 14 steps, or like what are the top weight loss supplements to buy. There's so much more education that happens with inbound. There's, I was literally being given like downloadable guides on how to start losing weight and how like the ultimate gym regimen, all of that stuff, all on the first page of Google. It was a huge difference in experience. It wasn't an ad saying buy my product. It was how to do the thing. What is it? Why do people fail at losing weight? Everyone wanted to educate me, and none of them were actually selling the services that they wanted. And I thought that was the most fascinating part of this, is to succeed with inbound, again, is to educate your buyer. It's not to just sell your product right away, but it's to build, and I think this will translate pretty well, to build trust with your buyer, to have them say, I've read this. You've told me how I can achieve the goal that I want to have. I can solve the problem that I have. I want to work with you to figure that out because I've already established this natural trust. And guess what? I haven't even spoken to you yet. I just read something on your website and you gave me the answer that I wanted. Now I'm ready to take that next step, versus you shoving it down my throat on the highway and saying, you have to figure it out. I just think that example always stands out to me as something it's such a clear, again, I'm not their target, but the fact that I remember these billboards because they stand out visually, but I don't know what their logo or what their brand is, clearly says that this outbound thing does not work for everybody. And it's clearly not working for me at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a great truth, because anytime you put an ad out there, whether it's a billboard or a ad on TV or something, there's a great chance that people will remember the ad and not remember your name, or remember your name and not remember your message, or, misunderstand, or I don't know, be offended by it, or think it's, too out of context. You're completely right. It's so easy to miss the mark. And I think what you're saying also is that inbound marketing is often playing the long game. Mm-hmm. You're not going to sell anyone today by giving them a 14-step weight loss guide, but you're going to let them know your brand, let them know what you're about, let them build a relationship with your company so that when they are ready to buy, you're the one that they trust, you're the one that they remember. So it's like a total mindset shift where it's not about like, it's not a get rich quick scheme, but it's a steady long-term play that's going to put you in good position for forever. And I love that you brought up the Marcus example with a pool. Marcus talks about how he wrote an article about what does a pool cost. Obviously, the cost of a pool has so many variables, it's hard to even generalize, but he did. And he wrote this article now, like 14 years ago. And it's
something
still
crazy like
it's still number one on Google. If you Google how much does a pool cost or how much does a fiberglass pool cost, you'll get Marcus's article from all those years ago. So this didn't get to number one in Google overnight, but it got there and it stayed there because it's useful and it's trustworthy. And that's inbound marketing done right.
John, what I worry about for the listener out there is that we sound like we're extremely biased to inbound, which hint, hint, we are. But I don't think that it doesn't mean that outbound doesn't work. I think in my example, I kind of made it sound like it's not working for me, but I'll be honest, I'm not looking to lose weight right now. If anything, I'd like to put on a few pounds, but
so maybe you drive past an advertisement for McDonald's, the same, the next billboard is one for McDonald's and you're pulling off.
That's it. Yeah. If I'm hungry, hey, it's an option. But I want to talk about the switch from outbound to inbound. And I think a lot of people look at when we say like, I want to start doing inbound, it's I want to stop doing outbound. And I don't think that's always the case, because I think there's a core principle, again, we've already mentioned it, of trust that happens between either outbound or inbound marketing. Do you want to dive into that a little bit?
Absolutely. To me, I think the internet is the great democratizer of marketing. If you can't afford a Super Bowl ad, your business, most likely, it's probably hard to afford billboards. Those are not cheap, or local ads in the news, whatever it is. But you could write a blog for free and get to the number one place in Google for free, provided it's good material, it's good content. And like that to me is like revolutionary. And we have a client at Impact who is a small office supply company, and they literally outrank Xerox and Ricoh and Canon and these huge companies for questions around copiers, because they sell and service copiers. And if you look up certain copier questions, you don't get Xerox, you get this pretty small company based in Nevada, because their content is the content that is resonating with buyers and building trust. And you're exactly right. Like, that's what it is about. If your content feels like an ad, if it feels salesy, if it feels biased or manipulative or overly persuasive, that's not what people are looking for. No one's going into Google and looking for an ad. They're going into Google and they're looking for information. And if you can provide them that information in a way that they deem as trustworthy, honest, candid, transparent, all of those sorts of things, then they're going to click and they're going to read it, and other people are going to read it, and maybe they'll share it, or maybe they'll bookmark it. And every time that happens, your result climbs up the search result, or your page climbs up the search result page. And that's why Marcus's article is number one for how much does a pool cost? Not because he paid to get it there. It's because so many thousands and thousands of people found it useful. And it's important to remember that Marcus's pool company serviced Richmond, Virginia. But thousands of people who would never buy from him, who aren't within his service area, also found it useful, also made it kind of bubble up to the top because it was helpful and trustworthy, as opposed to, just another person trying to sell you something.
Right. And, I think with outbound, you can develop trust too. And I think about, even an experience that I had last night / this morning was I was looking for some cool wall art. If you're watching the video version of this podcast, you'll notice that I have a very blank couple of walls behind me, and it's a little bit, yeah, it is very,
it's like
it's a lot of white, and I'm a pretty pale skinned person, so it just looks like I'm surrounded. Yeah, it does look kind of like just a white cell that I live in with a fancy bookshelf behind. But I was looking at some wall art and other things, and I had, obviously I'd searched it, and you know what I got some targeted ads, which I guess you could say are both, it's kind of a mix of inbound and outbound, because I clearly showed intent of buying, but they also found me. And I went and saved like 5 or 6 links because I was like, these look really cool. And they got me excited about something that I clearly showed interest in. And I think that's where the difference between, or that's where the blend between outbound and inbound is using my buying intent to use targeted ads. When you're just pumping money into, whether it be advertisements or billboards, you're just hoping for maximum volume with a couple people to convert. Versus if you find someone that's really targeted and you're putting your money in the right places, your outbound efforts are being fueled by inbound education. I was searching for things that are safe where you can't drill it into a wall. And so all these things were like, you can stick them up with command strips, or they have a magnet on the wall that sticks to the wall. Like, it was so fascinating to see that, but that was outbound. That ad was getting pushed to me, but it was fueled off of the right inbound strategies. And I want to make sure that it's clear for everyone that you don't have to drop outbound to do inbound well. You just they have to complement each other. And John, to your point, if you're writing an article about whatever it is, that article is going to be free. You don't have to pump money into it for it to succeed. And I want to bring one final point. I'm shooting from the hip a little bit, but I want to make this clear too. When you think about your experience on Google, the outbound strategies of having like Google ads at the top of your page, what's the initial instinct that you have? Is this company is trying to say, trust me, buy from me. How often do you just scroll over the ads and look for the first one that doesn't say ad next to it? Really often. But every once in a while, you'll ignore that, because you'll see that it's not just buy this product, but it's answering the exact question that you typed in, and they're just pumping it out. It's similar to what I just shared with my wall example, that they're just looking for really targeted keywords that they can advertise to. And that's not a bad use of outbound budget. But inbound, the beauty of it is that first result, you don't have to spend a dime on, and your buyers they might be scrolling right over the ads to find your first result that you didn't put a penny of product into.
Yeah, love it. So for Connor, for people who are thinking about dipping a toe into inbound, maybe they've never done it before, what's your big takeaway to kind of help them take that first step?
To put it into one sentence, I would say it's focus on what your customers want to know. Make sure that everything that you're doing, again, focus on inbound is to build that trust and to really know that your buyer's committed to purchasing from you, but focus on what your customers want to know. Don't just put money into something you hope they want to know. Do your research and focus on what your customers want to know, and you will succeed either with outbound or inbound. But if you want to start with inbound, start with that question first. That statement. That's not a question. That's a statement.
I think this is a great primer for anyone, and a great reminder for how inbound and outbound can blur together at times, how they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. But in all of our approach to our customers, we also know what it's like to be a customer ourselves. And when you treat your customers how you would want to be treated, it's the golden rule. And the results follow, because people, when they're treated well, that's where they put their money.
Completely agree. All right, John, this has been another episode of Solving Inbound. Today, we answered the question, I've only been doing outbound. How is inbound different, and how do I get started? We hope that you enjoyed. We hope that you'll join us again for next week's episode of Solving Inbound. We'll talk to you then.